All right, so this is basically like a half-day training class with hands-on boiled into an hour. Okay, so there's a lot of material. I'm going to go kind of quick, but you'll have the slides and you'll have the recording that you can look at later. So let's get started. There's some common questions people have when they're, attending a session like this. What happens when I enable Unity Catalog? We're going to show you that. Can I roll everything back if I want? If I want to deploy it and then I change my mind, I want to take everything back. Absolutely, you can do that. You can delete your Metastore, remove your workspaces from Unity Catalog. The only thing that'll be different if you do that is on the workspaces you join to Unity Catalog, you will have identity federation remaining enabled on them. And we'll talk about what that means. I'm going to talk about why your Azure AD Global Admin has to be involved. You see a note about that in the documentation. It's really just so that they can designate who the first Databricks account admin is. Yeah, so do you have to go to Unity Catalog? No, you don't have to go, but why wouldn't you? All of our incredible new features are going to be deployed on Unity Catalog. It enables things, it simplifies administration, but there's no pressure, there's no deadline for you. This session is designed to just remove all the friction so you can get it installed, start exploring it, and then figure out your own timeline for how you want to get there. And can I create dev and prod versions of my Unity catalog? No, and this is a common misunderstanding about how the data lifecycle is managed within Unity Catalog. After today's session, you'll understand why. Creating the Metastore only takes about a minute, but I find that it's helpful to go over some new concepts first. So we'll go over those, we'll make the Metastore, and then I'll go in and we'll take a look at what's changed, and we'll do a couple of things in the demo. That'll get you through step 5 here on kind of the roadmap to get to UC. At that point, you should be comfortable deploying Unity Catalog, for your enterprise. If you're a consultant, you can do it in a pay-go Azure subscription, which is where I'm doing the demo from today. And then after that, you can work with your account team, do some reading about the migration strategies, and get your plan together to get you to step 7. We've got our summit coming up this summer. Love to have you come to San Francisco if you can. If travel, and hotel is not in your plans, just be sure to register online. You can search for this on the web. There's a link in the slide. But come over here and you can get access to the agenda and, start building your own list of things that you want to see here. So all you got to do is register, and that way you can favorite things and it'll start curating your sessions for you. So Unity Catalog is a fundamental layer within the Databricks Lakehouse. It simplifies administration, powers strong governance over your data and AI resources in the Lakehouse. And soon it's going to let you govern data resources outside of Databricks. It also facilitates data sharing and improves productivity for everybody in your organization that works with data. So the benefits for Unity Catalog, they've been covered elsewhere. I've included a link on the slide to get to our product page. So I'm not going to go into any more details on what the benefits of Unity Catalog are today. I'm assuming and you can have plenty of opportunities to learn about it if you'd like to. The documentation for it is easy to find. Just search the web for what is Unity Catalog Azure, and you'll find a link to this page right up at the top. So today we're going to focus on these 5 areas of Unity Catalog: setting up a Metastore, discussing what account level user and group management means and how it simplifies administration. We're going to configure Unity Catalog storage credentials and external locations. These are 2 new objects in the product that power a new and more secure way to access your cloud storage data. And I'll demonstrate how to grant permissions to users and groups using the UI. You can also use SQL and API for that, as well as Terraform. And while we currently govern access to your data in Azure storage containers, a new feature called Query Federation is currently in private preview. And this lets you govern access to other databases like Snowflake, BigQuery, and Synapse, just to name a few. So be sure to register for the Data and AI Summit if you're interested in that. There will be sessions on it, as well as all kinds of other things coming and what customers are doing with Databricks. Okay, so let's start by talking about what a Metastore is. So without Unity Catalog, your workspaces, typically one for development staging and another for production, each has its own Hive Metastore, as well as its own user and group management. Now, you can optionally configure table access control for each workspace, but it's hard to administer things. So for example, if you wanted to access production data in staging, you need to copy data around. And while there is an external Hive Metastore option, it's still a pain to administer these siloed Hive Metastores. With Unity Catalog, these things are all moved to your Databricks account level above the workspaces, making it a lot easier to manage data access no matter how many workspaces you have. And, before we move on, it's just important to I'll say this a couple of times today. You can only have one Unity Catalog Metastore per region. Okay, so you're not going to have a dev and a prod Metastore in the US East Azure region, for example. You just have one Metastore, and we manage it for you in each region where you use Databricks. Now, this slide shows the blue boxes, shows that the Hive Metastore is located inside the workspace, but it's really not inside. So the Hive metadata is managed by Databricks in a regional metadata service like I'm showing here. And your managed Hive table data is stored either in DBFS root by default, or if you specify a location on your Hive schemas, then the data is written wherever you specified. I'm showing a ABFS, storage container here. Similarly, Unity Catalog metadata, that is information about your tables and views, schemas, catalogs, it's also managed by Databricks. But unlike Hive, Unity Catalog also centrally manages information about your users and groups and service principals, as well as the permissions, all at the account level, which, as you're going to see, really simplifies access management and auditing. And just like Hive, Unity Catalog has its default location where managed table data is written, and you can also optionally specify additional storage locations where all of specific schema data would be written if you choose to, or you can just set it at the catalog level. So your dev managed table data is written to your dev location, test and prod written to their specific places as well. This is really nice because, for example, let's say that you have some really highly sensitive finance data that needs to be written to a special storage account. You could set this feature on your finance schema, and then we'll write all the managed data over there for you. Now, in the demo, you're going to see me specify a managed data location for my dev catalog. Okay, I'm going to make the dev catalog. I'm going to point it so that any managed tables created in the dev catalog schemas will be written over to my non-prod storage location, just as an example to kind of show you how that works. And when we create the Metastore together in a few minutes, you'll see me specify the path to my Metastore root container. I call it the Metastore root container. I don't know that we exactly have a name for it, but that's the place where managed tables will be created in Unity Catalog if we haven't provided any other specific location for where we want to put them. Okay, and then just remember, you're only going to get one Unity Catalog Metastore per region. So if you decide to set the path that I'm showing in yellow highlight there to a POC storage account, let's say, right? Just realize, first of all, you can't change this setting later. So you can't set it to a POC path now and then later change it to your production path. I'd recommend making a container in your production storage account. Point this at that container so you're ready to go. But if you're really not ready to do all that, you have to, file tickets and talk to your teams before you can do that kind of stuff. Feel free to just make a POC Unity Catalog Metastore. Set it all up with POC throwaway resources, play around with it with a test workspace. And then when you're done, you can delete everything and just get started again. That's a great way to learn how things work. Certainly doesn't hurt to do that. So let's just talk a little more about managed tables. So just like with Hive, there's two kinds of tables. So our documentation will call them managed tables or external tables. I like to use the terms managed and unmanaged. And the reason is even managed tables in Unity Catalog, as I showed you, the data is written to your storage account. And that, to me, that just doesn't feel like an internal location. It's not the same thing as with Hive, where it was written to DBFS, right? So in Unity Catalog, managed tables and unmanaged tables both write their data to external locations. They write it to places in your storage account. So anyway, call it what you want, but that's why I like to kind of call this out for you here. The main difference between the two is that with managed tables, when you drop the table, we're going to delete the cloud storage data as well. And that's generally what SQL users would expect, right? So it's easier. On the other hand, a lot of cloud data engineers, they're more comfortable with the unmanaged or external tables, just because that's what they're familiar with. And both are supported. You can use whichever one you want. You know, the main difference is the dropping of the table and deleting the data. The other is that we're going to be doing auto tuning of managed tables for you very soon. There's a preview going on right now with this there. So it'll take care of things like, you know, the partitioning and the cleanup and all that stuff for you. But you can certainly do those things on the external unmanaged tables as well. Last thing I want to just highlight here is when you make a managed table in Unity Catalog, where does the data get written? Okay, so it's just an order of precedence. We'll go to the most specific place that you may have defined. So if you had a location on a schema, then we're going to write it there. If you didn't, but you had one on the catalog, like the dev, tester, prod catalog, then we'll write it in that place. And if you didn't do any of those things, then it's going to go in the UC Metastore root. And that's why I like to have that pointing to a production storage account, just because in case you want to take advantage of that feature, it would make sense that that's kind of data that you might be end user data, for example. Okay, so let's move on to the next concepts, external locations and storage credentials. These are two new account level objects that are managed by Unity Catalog. And for the most part, these are set up once and then forget about them kind of things. These are things that admins are going to do. And once you do it, you're done. You don't really revisit these things anymore. In Azure, a UC storage credential is going to map to a Azure managed identity. There is an option, used to be an option to do a service principal. You know, I'm not going to talk about it because the recommendation is to use a system assigned managed identity. So that's what I'm going to do. So what I'm showing in the screen here is that when users go to access data through the clusters, it's that managed identity. We're going to be making a token from that managed identity and using that token to get to the data. So on the left, you see what we're not doing anymore. We're not having to mess with secret scopes and key vaults and key rotation and spark.conf settings and all of that stuff. We also don't do credential pass-through anymore because the access to the data is by Unity Catalog and through the storage credential that maps to that managed identity. Okay, that's how we're going to actually get to the data. Whether you get there or not is going to be dependent on whether Unity Catalog thinks you have the right permissions or not. So we're going to come to that. So let's just kind of take a picture of how did it work before Unity Catalog. You know, you've got table access control. You probably had a set on your cluster, so you could have any kind of governance at all. Then the cluster would check to see if the user has access to some table path. The cluster then is going to read the data using a service principal that you set up on the cluster, or maybe you did credential pass-through in Azure. And the problem is that that's all really hard for administrators. It's hard because it's hard to let users make clusters because they don't know how to do those things. And you're also basically over provisioning these clusters. You're providing too much access because you got to give the access that the common denominator needs, and that might be more than other people need. So with Unity Catalog, first, we don't configure table access control in the workspace. Instead, we grant permissions through Unity Catalog centrally, like you're going to see in the demo. We don't do the secret scopes, key vaults, and all that business. Once your external locations are set up, you can create a UC cluster and you don't have to put anything else on it, and it can securely access data on behalf of all your users based on whatever permissions you assign them. User access is going to be checked by Unity Catalog, of course. And so then if the user is allowed to get to the data, Unity Catalog will work with Azure to generate a short-lived, down-scoped access token that gives the user the minimum level of access they need to get to that data path that they've just been authorized for. So, all of that is really cool, but it's all transparent to you and your users. It's managed by Azure and the Unity Catalog service running inside Azure Databricks. So with those kind of new concepts out of the way, let's just take a look now at some common deployment patterns. So, I'm just kind of showing 3 scenarios. On the left is a simple one. I've seen some smaller organizations that just have all of their data, dev, test, prod, all in one storage account in Azure. It's totally fine if that's what you want to do. In that case, a single UC storage credential, is all that you need, and a couple of external locations. The middle picture is a little more typical, where, in particular, where there's a governance requirement to separate prod and non-prod data. In this case, you could have 2 storage credentials, as I'm showing here. And the third one is just to show that you can really do whatever you want. You have all kinds of flexibility here, and we're happy to talk to you, talk to your account team if you've got special requirements, you're not sure what makes sense. We're happy to talk with you and get a specialist hooked up to get you going in the right direction. Okay, so in my example, for Unity Catalog to be able to read and write to my production storage account, what I'm going to do in the demo is I'm going to assign the managed identity that's associated with my production storage account. I'm going to assign it the storage blob data contributor role. So you're going to see me give it that read-write access there. And I'm showing in this picture that there's one more little object there. So you see above the prod storage credential, there's actually something called a Azure Databricks access connector. And that's the thing that you're going to see me make. Now, when you make an access connector, it's going to create a system managed identity behind the scenes that is integrally linked to that access connector. They're bound together. You delete one, then the other's gone too. So I'm just showing that because when I go through the demo, you probably go back and look at it and say, wait a minute, he started by making an access connector, but then later I saw him pick something that said manage identity. You can read about this on the Azure website, and this is what's recommended. So this is the approach that I'm going to take, and you'll see that in the documentation as well. Now, I also show that there's a production operations group in AD. Maybe it has read-write access to the storage, the production storage accounts, whatever you want to do. It's not required for us. I'm just showing kind of who really needs read-write access to that storage account. Now, your business users, right, your analysts and so forth, they just need Unity Catalog permissions, okay? And these are set on the catalog, the schema or database, and on the tables, okay? They don't need any permissions at all on the ADLS storage account, okay? So no credential pass-through. This is a great way. Even your developers don't need access to that, to the storage accounts, which is important because that way you're managing all your permissions in one place. You don't have to manage them here and also go to Azure and set up things and manage it there, okay? Now, if we look at another scenario, let's say here's my non-production scenario. Let's say my dev environment. So in this case, I probably have, external processes, maybe ADF or something that's dumping data files into the raw landing area there. Okay, so I'm going to have to give those external processes read-write access to whatever those containers are, so they can drop, HR data, maybe finance or Salesforce data, right? If you want to use that approach. I still have to give that storage blob data contributor role to my managed identity. And then my developers need privileges on the data assets in Unity Catalog, right? So in this case, that's my dev catalog. And I might also, I'm going to have to give them some Unity Catalog permissions on those external locations. These are special permissions that let the developer read those files that are landing in cloud storage that are not actually in the lakehouse yet. They're just files, CSV and JSON files. There's no Delta tables there. So we give you that ability to control who can read that area. And that's really important because you want to secure that area. There might be sensitive data there too, even though it's not in Unity Catalog yet. And this gives you that flexibility. Last thing I show is just, developers, you might want to give them access to production data, read access. Privileges in Unity Catalog inherit down. So you can set all three of those privileges, use catalog, use schema, and select. You can set them up on the catalog level, and they will cascade down and give users access to everything below it. Okay, before we get started, I want to talk about what happens when you deploy Unity Catalog Metastore, you add a workspace to it. There is one change that happens around group management, okay? Before you do that, you can create your users and groups in the workspace, the workspace admin console. And there's a create group button. You can create a group, type in the name, and you just made what we call a local workspace group. Problem is that was really hard to administer for customers, especially those that had lots of workspaces, because you have to make these groups over and over and over again and manage the membership separately in each workspace. But that's the way it worked before. And I'm just showing you the picture because you see that group, that create group button with the plus sign, that's going to go away. After you add the workspace to Unity Catalog, you can still create users locally. And if you do, we're going to sync them up to the account level for you automatically. But you can't make groups locally anymore. Instead, what you do is you create the groups in the account console, and then you go back to your workspace admin console, and you can click the add group button. So it's a subtle change. It's the difference between creating a group and adding a group to the workspace, right? So the groups are managed centrally at the account level. And if you later remove this workspace from Unity Catalog, this behavior will remain in place. Okay, it's not necessarily a problem. You can just make groups at the account level and still bring them down to the workspace. But if you have, I guess some customers have 500 groups that are maybe being synced from Active Directory with Skim, definitely you're going to want to think this through, right? So that might be a good opportunity to just make a POC Metastore in a workspace and test things out a little bit before you add one of your real development workspaces in. Now, I've been talking about the account console. So some of you might be wondering, what is the account console? It's not the workspace admin console. This is the Databricks account console, and it's something that you may not have seen yet. So on the left, if you are a Databricks account admin, when you click that manage account menu shown on the left, it's going to take you to the account console because you have that role I show on the bottom there, the account admin role. But probably a lot of you, when you click that manage account, it takes you to a list of workspaces, and you never really thought about what is that really doing for me? The reason that's happening is you are not an account admin yet. So the question might be, how do you become an account admin if you can't even get to the console to do it? So the way you do it is you get your global AD admin to just give you 5 minutes of their time. You're going to ask them to sign into the Azure portal and then go to that URL I show, accounts.azuredatabricks.net. We will then automatically provision them into the account console as a Databricks admin. They can then go and you can show them how to find you in there because we've been syncing all your users up since last June. They're going to pick you, go to the role tab and give you that access, okay? Then you can sign into the account console and then you can remove the global AD admin from Databricks. They don't usually have any business in there, but this just kind of helps you explain to them why you need their help in the beginning. So I put some links on the slide to the documentation so that they can read about it and see if this is all on the up and up. And you might want to just get this out of the way, like just go set up a 15-minute meeting, get it done, and then you can move about creating the Metastore at your own pace. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff I wanted to get out of the way. We're doing great on time, so I'm just now going to head into the demo, which will take us through the rest of the session. Going to make a Metastore, going to join a workspace to it. I'm going to go into the Data Explorer and show you what changed, and we're going to actually upgrade a external Hive table to Unity Catalog, just to kind of give you a feel for everything that's going on. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm doing this in a personal Azure account, and that just you can do the same thing. It actually really doesn't cost anything to deploy 2 workspaces and a Metastore and connect it all up. It's only when you turn on the compute to do something that you have to pay a little bit of money. But if you're not able to do this in your own company for whatever reason, I encourage you, just go sign up for a free Paygo account at Microsoft. As I said, it doesn't cost you anything, and you can go through everything I'm going to do here today. Okay, so this is a workspace called Dev East US. So let's say this is my dev workspace. And let's say I have some work in here and I have a legacy cluster there. Let's just take a look at this legacy cluster. And down in the bottom, I had to configure credentials so that this thing can talk to my storage. Now, you probably do service principals, which is better. I just took a quick, easy way out. I'm just throwing the storage account key in the Azure Key Vault, and I'm using Databricks Secret Scope to fetch it into my cluster. This is the thing that's hard for you. The first time, it took me a long time to figure out how to get all that done. A lot of administrators pulling their hair out on that stuff. With Unity Catalog, you won't be doing this anymore down here at all when you make new clusters or warehouses. All right, so that's my cluster. So now let me show you on the data side what things look like before we turn on Unity Catalog. So I'm in my storage account here. I'm in my Hive Metastore looking at a database and some tables. This is a managed table. And I'm going to use my legacy cluster to read the data out of there. And you can see it says manage, and it's in DBFS like we talked about before. This is my external table. Same data, it's just an external table, and you can see it's external, and it's in my dev container in my non-production storage account in some bronze path over here. Okay, so I just wanted you to see that this is the table we're going to upgrade later. And so now we can go over to Azure and we can start making the things that we need to make the Metastore. So some of the things are here. There's my workspaces. I have an Access connector already made for development just for the sake of time, but I'm going to show you how you make this for the production one. So we can do that together. Okay, so we're going to create a new one. This one I'm going to put in my prod resource group. I'm going to call it, let's see, what did I want to call it? I keep changing my mind about whether I want to put the prod on the front or the back. I decided I kind of like doing it on the front better. So it'll be a little inconsistent in the demo. Prod Databricks Access Connector, East US. Let's go create that. These are really easy to create. And as I mentioned, it's going to, I'm going to hit the create again. It's going to create a system assigned manage identity behind the scenes with the same name. Okay. Now I'm going to have to copy as the documentation. All this stuff is in the documentation. So you can follow along there, look at the video, do them side by side. Everything I'm doing is in the doc. You're going to be told to copy this resource ID from this connector you just made. So I'm going to go and put that over here in my little text pad off screen, because I'm going to need that when we make the Metastore. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is go to my storage account. This is my production storage account, and I'm going to make a container in there for the Metastore root location. So here's my prod stuff. Let's just say that's all my, all the good stuff that you know about. I'm going to create that new container, and I'm going to call it UC Metastore root. Okay, call it whatever you want. Doesn't matter, but you do have to have a container. Now we're going to have to remember the path to this container. So that's going to be abfss : / UC Metastore root @ storage account name .dfs.core.windows.net. Okay, we'll need that when we go type that in to make the Metastore. Last thing I need to do here on the storage account is I need to give the manage identity we just made access, read-write access to the storage account. So I'm going to do an add role assignment. And it's not just read-write, it's storage blob data contributor. This is the one you have to give, storage blob data contributor role. We're going to choose, remember how I said, you saw me start by making a access connector, but now I'm going to go search for it again. I'm searching for the managed identity that got made behind the scenes for that access connector. This is all documented, but you can see why it's kind of nice to have a video to kind of show you what you're doing. So you're going to be told to go search for all system assigned managed identities. I only have 2. You might have a lot in your company. Here's the one I just made where I'm putting prod on the front now. My new naming convention I like better. So I'm going to pick that one and say select. And that's basically it for all the setup stuff in Azure. Now, again, if you can't do this in your production environment, maybe you want to set up a POC Metastore and do that, play around with it. And then when you're done, just delete it. And then you will be ready to make everything for real. That's totally fine. Okay, so now let's go into the account console. And so this is the part where I said, you've probably seen, if you're a workspace admin, you've seen this menu before. When I click it, I'm going to get into the account console. That's because in a personal PayGo subscription, I am a global AD admin in my own subscription. So I was always able to get there. In your case, you're going to have your new friend that you're making. You're going to have them go to this URL here. You don't have to add them to the workspace. They don't have to use the menu I did. They can just go to this URL right here, and then they will get into it just like I did. And if they don't, it's because they're not a global, they don't have the global AD admin role. So when they get here, you're going to ask them to come over here to user management, and they're going to see their name right there, and they're going to see the account admin. But then you're going to ask them to come search for you, because we've been syncing all of your user IDs from all of your workspaces since last summer up to your account level. So they're all going to be here. Just have them go find you and then go into your account and flip the role on for yourself like it is on for me, okay? And then at that point, you really don't need them anymore. You can thank them very much, and you can come in, you can remove them or do whatever you want with their account and thank them very much. Now, while we're here, let's look at these groups. So these are the new account level groups. I had made a couple just for the sake of time here. I made a group called UC Metastore Owners. I think this is a recommendation I would make for you is go ahead and make one of these, put yourself in it and whoever else you trust with your Unity Catalog Metastore. But it's a good idea to have a group here when we go to make the Metastore, because that way you've got other people that can still take over and minister the Metastore. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to say there. So let's just go and make the Metastore. So you just create the button, give it a name. I'm going to call it UC Metastore East US. Now I want to see you putting like dev and POC and test on the end of this, because that would imply you're going to make another one later and you're going to have them both at the same time, which you won't be able to do. So you might as well just get in the habit of giving it a name for your region so that later if you make another one for like Central Region or Europe or something, you'll be able to differentiate the two. So I'm going to call this, I'm going to pick East US as my region. There we go. And here's the path to the managed, to the Metastore route that we've been talking about. So let me go grab it out of my clipboard here. Now, the hint text in there is kind of faint, but it does not show ABFSS : in there. They're going to add that for you later. You really just need the container at storage account with all of this stuff on the end. And you do need a trailing slash, okay? So just remember trailing slash for this to be a valid format in this UI. Now, what are we going to put here? So this is that resource ID that I copied after I made the access connector at the start of the demo. So I'm going to copy that one over here and put it in there. Under the advanced options, it's just if you wanted to use a user assigned managed identity instead of a system assigned managed identity, you can do it. I don't know why you'd want to do it. The system assigned is the one that's recommended. If you know of a reason why you'd prefer to use this one, feel free to pop some info in the Q&A for Robert and the team. We can talk about that. But that's not needed for us today, so we can go ahead and create it. Okay, and it'll let you know right away if it works or not. If it can't, it's going to try to get to that Metastore. And if it can't get there and write, it's going to give you an error right away. It worked for us. So now we're moving on to step 2. You can pick workspace right now, just as a convenience, or you can hit skip. Doesn't matter. You can add the workspace later. You can call it a day right now and go to lunch if you want. That's okay. I'm going to pick it and click assign. Now we've gone over all this already. Like, you know what Unity Catalog does. You know that, there might be some things like if you're doing your dev one and you're doing skim, there's some things you're going to have to go and clean up and fix up. Where it says that this can't be reversed, I just want to clarify. You can remove the workspace from UC. You can certainly do it. There's a menu right there on the screen. But if you do, just remember that you won't be able to make local groups anymore, because what can't be reversed is that identity federation is going to remain enabled. Okay, but it's not a problem. And you can learn more if you want, of course. So congratulations. Like I said, it doesn't take long to make the Metastore. There's a nice, there's some sample notebooks here you can look at. I'm not going to do it for the sake of time, but these are recommended to, help you, guide you through. You can create catalogs in the UI with SQL. These give you all the SQL, syntax to do all the creating and testing of things. And at this point, I'm not going to do Delta sharing, although that's a super cool feature, and there's other sessions on that. I'm going to change the Metastore owner, okay, from me to that group that I mentioned. Okay, I think this is something, don't forget to do that. This is a great time to do it. Okay, so that's basically it for making the Metastore. Let's go back to the workspace. Now, this is still sitting here from before. Like, I don't have to like restart the workspace, or like nothing happened. Your users won't even notice that anything happened right away. If you refresh this page, I want you to watch things change just a little bit. So the UI gets this set of accordions, like a data accordion here, and then the Delta sharing storage. And these will be shown if you have the access, which I do, because I'm a Metastore owner. Your normal users just won't see these at all. They'll probably just see the data one with, the familiar stuff here. I want to do some more things here, but first I want to make a Unity Catalog cluster, and let's go get that started so we don't have to wait around for it. Go pop that into a new tab, and we're going to click create. And hopefully I have enough quota left in my Azure account to make one more cluster. So I'm going to make a super small one, single node, 4 core. I should have enough for that. I don't need it running very long. And might as well make it the newest stable release, long-term support release. Now, I could just create it, right? But I wanted to show you how to upgrade that external Hive table to Unity Catalog. And to do that, you actually need a cluster that is both Unity Catalog enabled and has the old storage credential stuff to be able to read the old Hive data. So for that, I am going to just pop in while I'm here. I'm going to pop in that same thing that I had in the other cluster, the same storage key setting. And again, this is only because I wanted to do that little demo for you. Trust me, you don't have to put anything here, and Unity Catalog works on all your clusters and SQL warehouses just great. All right, so let's hope that starts up. This is a great chance to show you what the future of serverless is all about. Because now here I have to sit here and wait 5 minutes for those VMs to get provisioned by the cloud vendor. What you can do, if you go over to your SQL persona here, and now there's these SQL warehouses here, right? But if I click this button, it's going to tell me, Jim, you don't have enough quota to start up these VMs here for this thing. But guess what? I can go over to the SQL admin settings. And if you're a workspace admin, you can enable serverless SQL right now. So you don't have to be in any special preview for it. Just go turn it on maybe one workspace or whatever. Hit the save button. Don't forget to hit the save button on the bottom. And now when I come back to I think I lost it. Let me go back to my SQL SQL page. Now, when I come back to that warehouse, look what happens when I click this. I get the new purple serverless option. This is great because now you're going to be getting instant access to that compute because those VMs are already running in Databricks, waiting for you. And so I'm going to set this to a 2x small because I'm super cheap, but it doesn't really cost much because I'm only paying for the query time that I'm running. I'm not paying for it to be up and then when it's running and no one's using it. So make it small or large, whatever you want. You don't need to put any other things here. No storage credentials, no account keys, no nothing, because this is going to be enabled for Unity Catalog now. So let's call this Jim's Serverless SQL. Okay, create. Give people access to it or not, whatever. I'm just testing, so that's fine for me. You've got this monitoring UI here where you can see queries running. You can go check the query profiler, see how they're being optimized. So many things you can do with Databricks SQL now. So let's just go use it. Let's go over to the SQL editor. I'll go make a table right now and just show you how cool Unity Catalog is with serverless. All right, so I'm going to paste in my create table statement. Now, you can use use catalog, use schema. There's different, ways to do that. I'm just going to do a quick 3-part table name, main.default.firstTable. Let's run it. For a cold start serverless query, it takes about 5 to 8 seconds for the VMs to get the DB SQL code on them and provision to you, and then the query runs. After that, the queries just run really fast, and then it will stay warm for the amount of time you put when you created the serverless warehouse. If you saw me, I had it set to 10 minutes. That seems to be a good amount of time because you might want to run another query. And, if it times out, it'll just take a little 5 to 8 seconds longer the next time to start up again. So let's see. Let's go look at the Data Explorer now. And actually, I wanted to see if my cluster finished. Still starting. Okay, that's fine. So let's come back over here and let's see. So we could, if we look, I think I can see it over here. If I just go to my main.default, there's that table. So just got made, didn't have to wait for a cluster to start up. Just trying to show you while we were waiting something cool about DB SQL. Encourage you to go enable that serverless SQL. It's heavily discounted pricing through July. So you've got time to play with it. This is a good time to play with it right now. And as I say, you only pay a couple pennies per query. So it's great for developers playing around with stuff. Okay, so what do I want to do next? Let's go make that catalog. Before we make the catalog, I'll just check one last time. Hey, the cluster finished. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch this over to my Unity Catalog cluster. I guess this is the one I forgot to put UC on it. That's fine. And I don't know, let's just refresh this page. I wanted to just show you the table I'm going to be upgrading, and then we'll head back to wrap things up. So it's in the right. So it's in here. So new cluster connects. The Hive is going to show me this table. Maybe I showed this to you before. Yeah. So this is where the data is located. So you see the upgrade button here. Now that I have a Unity Catalog cluster that also has the legacy credentials in it to get to Hive, which is over here, you can get this button and upgrade that table. But before I upgrade it, I want to make my dev catalog because that's where I'm going to put it. Okay, and so for that, what we have to do is make a storage credential, like you saw on the slide. So we're going to say make a new storage credential. My new naming convention is I like to use dev.storage credential. Call it whatever you want. I need to put that resource ID in here. This is the one from the dev one that already exists. As you remember, I showed you before just to save some time. So I'm going to copy that one over here and create it. Now I'm going to make the external location. That's all there was to it. Now I'm going to make the external location. This is my dev external location. So I'll call it dev external location. This is the URL to the root of that external location. And any user that accesses something under it is going to be using the storage credential we just made to get to it. This one does require the ABFSS. And I'm going to go grab this out of my clipboard just again, so I don't make a typo. There we go. You actually don't need the trailing slash on this. You could put this to a path down there if you wanted to. In my case, this is the external location for all of my dev data, which is in the dev container of that non-prod storage account. Here I'm picking the credential that I wanted to use to get to it, and I'm going to create it. Oh, and what did I forget? I must have forgotten something. What did I forget? External location. Let me just run back here and see. I might have forgotten to set the IAM role on that non-prod account. So let me just go back here and look. And here's my, that's what I want to point it to. So I'm going to go to here. I'm just going to view the assignments real quick, see if I forgot. Looks like I did forget one thing, darn. All right, so let's go ahead and do that then. So we're going to add a role assignment. Okay, add role assignment. The storage Bob contributor role. Okay, and next, and I'm going to go and pick it. And this is the other one, DB access connector non-prod. This is the one I had made previously. Let's add that in. Okay, now I think it'll be fine. Let's not force anything. Let's just create it again. That has to be right. I just wonder if maybe what I need to do is just refresh this page. Let me just try that. Sometimes, you know, I'm doing all these things at once. It gets a little bit ahead of the way the UI is designed to support. So let's just try it. I think the storage credential is good. It's using the right one. If I go to my external location, I'm going to try to do it one more time. Dev ext location. I'm going to put that path in there again. Dev, okay, all looks good. ABFSS. And I'm going to pick that dev storage credential. I think there was something about the UI. One thing, when you're in development mode and you're like creating and trying stuff and flipping clusters, if something doesn't work, it's a single page web app, just hit the refresh. I'm sure stuff like this gets worked out over time, but don't be discouraged by it. So hang in there with me. So I'm going to hit the test connection, make sure everything's good. See, it is all good. And then, this is an external location. So like if this was the one going to my raw files location, then you might want to grant your developer engineers, the ability to read files out of there. In this case, it's a development external location where they might want to create external tables. In that case, you need to give them this one. So, you can read more about that. You can play around with it. But again, if you get error messages, try to refresh the page. If you get error messages after that, see if you maybe didn't set the permissions up and someone doesn't have access. Because when you are in here as a Metastore owner, you've got the big club and everything you do usually works. So later on, as you try to make your groups and delegate things, that's when you're gonna really learn how the permissions actually work. So we made the external location. Now we can make our catalog. We're going to call this catalog dev, and it's going to be having all managed tables written in this catalog are going to go through this location, and I'm going to put them in a special folder, managed data. Now, I do need to have that folder over here. And if I go back to my non-prod account, you see that under dev, external location, there, I did make one. So I have it here. You would, I just like to organize this so they don't get thrown all around in there. So let's go ahead and create that. And now I can go and upgrade that table for you. So let's go back to the Hive Metastore, go to the flights, click on this table. I'm going to hit the upgrade button. You can multi-select tables. You can also pick an entire schema. I just have the one table I'm gonna do, and pick my catalog. I'll pick the default one, and we'll hit run the upgrade. Now, if you connect up here to a SQL warehouse, you have a button to generate a query for the upgrade. So you can then take that query, review it, look at it, adjust it, whatever, and then run it in the SQL editor. For me, I'm just going to hit the run upgrade and do it. So this is going to look at the Hive data for the table, create it all over in Unity Catalog, preserving Delta history, table properties, everything. So we can come over and take a look at it here in dev, default, and the flight history. There it is. Okay. So that's all I wanted to show in the demo. What I was going to do is just pop back here and wrap up with a couple things that just to point out to you that are available when you get the slide deck. So just a picture about, multiple catalogs inside the one Metastore and your workspaces and your storage accounts. 3-level namespace. I think you get it. Unity Catalog adds a third level to it. And over on the left here, I'm showing that the Hive Metastore from the workspace that you're in, that will be shown as like a virtual Unity catalog, like you saw for me, just so that you can work with that data from Unity Catalog, copying like I just did, for example. You may not want to have 3-part table names in your code, right? If your code has 2-part table names today, you can set the catalog on the cluster. Okay, so there's a setting that you can add here so that your dev clusters all default to the dev Unity Catalog and your prod clusters default to the prod one. This is something you might want to take a look at. You can do the same trick on your ODBC and JDBC connections. And let's see. Let me also just show for migration. I showed you the upgrade tables feature up here, okay? There's also a newer way that a lot of people like better, which is to use what's called the sync command. So what I did was it made a snapshot of the metadata and copied it to UC. But if you are trying to run in parallel for a while and you had to add another column on the Hive side, we're not going to see it in Unity Catalog. If you use the sync command, it will do the same thing I did, but it will set up a sync between UC and the Hive to make sure that any changes to your columns over on the Hive side will automatically be reflected in Unity Catalog. So there's a link here to a blog that talks about this. There's also documentation you can read. Check out community, talk to your account team, and definitely go to the Summit, register for Summit and see, how other customers are upgrading to Unity Catalog. That's really important, I think, for you to have in your toolkit. Okay, so just to wrap it up, know what your governance requirements are for data access. Can you store prod and non-prod data in the same place? Yes or no? Right there, it's going to dictate how you deploy Unity Catalog. Map out your deployment patterns and your naming conventions, right? Get your global AD admin on board. Get that Databricks account, admin role thing out of the way. Create your first account admin. Learn about the roadmap. I talked about query federation is coming. There's catalog to workspace binding features that let you say which catalogs are allowed in which workspaces. There's a lot of things coming. So learn about the roadmap. When you're getting ready to go, you create the Azure stuff, you make your Metastore. assign the owner group. You can make a POC workspace if you want to play around and you're concerned about the identity federation. When you're ready to go, you create your groups, your catalogs, your permissions, and then you are ready to start thinking about your migration strategy. If I could say one thing, I encourage you to make a Metastore and get hands-on experience with it, because it's going to help you understand and think about how you want to do your migration. It's kind of hard to just do the whole thing in a whiteboard in a couple of meetings. You really need to have time to kind of look at it and play around with it. So, hey, go build your best lakehouse with Unity Catalog. Thanks so much for your time. We're right at time. I think at this point, why don't we wrap it up? And as I say, the recording will get posted early next week. You will get an email if you register for the session with a link to that recording. So I hope you like the session. Give us some feedback on it and let us know what you like about what you saw. What can we do to make it easier, both in terms of the product and also how we explain all of these new things to you. Thanks a lot and have a great weekend. Bye, everybody.